Carved high on a temple beam in Abydos, the stone seems to show a helicopter, a submarine, and even something like a flying craft. For decades, that single panel has pulled people back to the same question. What are we really looking at? Abydos lies in Upper Egypt, a sacred place tied to kingship, burial, and the god Osiris. In that silence of sandstone and sun, every mark feels older than memory and heavier than explanation. The panel became famous not because it was large, but because it looked impossible. When the shapes were first circulated in modern photographs, they seemed to collide with the boundary between translation and imagination. The story begins in a temple built for Seti I and later altered under Ramesses II. That overlap matters because layered stonework can preserve one inscription while turning another into something entirely new. Supporters of the extraordinary reading point to the panel's uncanny outlines. They see a rotor mast, a fuselage, and a tail boom, as if the wall remembered a machine from another age. That is where the mystery deepens, because the stone does not simply look damaged. It looks revised, as though one inscription was chiseled away and another was written over it in the same sacred space. In the strongest believer case, the panel is not a joke of chance. It is treated as a visual anomaly, a place where ancient symbolism appears to cross into the language of modern flight. The appeal is easy to understand. Human beings are built to recognize patterns, but sometimes a pattern lands with such force that it feels less like coincidence and more like a message. To follow the claim fairly, you have to slow down and look at the details. The first is the layered carving itself, where older lines seem partially buried beneath later cuts. The second is the shape of the central figure, which can appear machine-like from one angle and purely symbolic from another. That instability is exactly what keeps the debate alive. The third is the setting itself. Abydos was not a casual building site. It was a ritual landscape where images were meant to endure and where meaning was never chosen lightly. And then there is the fourth detail, the way the panel entered modern culture. Once the images spread, the carving became a kind of test case for how far ancient symbols can be pushed. For many, the question is not whether a helicopter was literally carved there, but whether an advanced image was encoded in a language we no longer fully understand. That possibility gives the stone its strange power. Egyptian writing often uses symbols in ways that are compact, layered, and context-dependent. A sign can stand for a sound, an idea, or a sacred association, which leaves room for startling misreadings. That is the conventional path into the mystery. Over time, inscriptions can be damaged, recut, or restored, and two different layers can visually merge into one impossible image. Even so, the panel refuses to feel ordinary at first glance. The mind keeps returning to the same silhouette, as if the stone were inviting a comparison it never intended to make. That tension is the heart of the Abydos claim. The image can be read as a palimpsest of royal names and titles, yet it can also be experienced as something uncannily modern. The believer's argument becomes strongest when the panel is compared with other ancient sky myths. Across cultures, people described chariots, birds of fire, and beings descending from above. Those stories do not prove machines in the past, but they do show how often the heavens were treated as a place of arrival, instruction, and power. Abydos sits inside that older human habit of looking up. Then comes the question of precision. If the panel is only damaged text, why do the merged forms feel so specific, so close to recognizable hardware from the modern age? Skeptics answer that our minds are excellent at imposing familiar shapes on unfamiliar marks. In a carved language, especially one that has been weathered and reworked, resemblance can become a powerful illusion. They also point to the practical history of the site. Reliefs were often altered across reigns, and later restoration could compress two messages into one visual accident. That explanation is plausible, but it still leaves a residue of unease. The panel is not just a puzzle of translation, it is a puzzle of why this particular set of shapes became so persuasive. The most compelling part of the case may be emotional rather than technical. People do not keep returning to this carving because it is easy. They return because it seems to open a door in the wall of history. In that sense, the Abydos glyphs sit beside many other enduring enigmas. They remind us that ancient monuments are not only records of kings, but also mirrors for modern wonder. What makes the claim hard to dismiss entirely is the combination of place, layering, and resemblance. Each element alone can be explained, but together they create a stubborn little knot of uncertainty. If the panel is only a recut inscription, then it is a remarkable accident of history and perception. If it is something more, then it hints at a lost visual language hiding inside plain sight. That possibility is why the story persists. It is not just about whether an aircraft was carved in stone, but about how much of the ancient world we may still be learning to read. The conventional explanation remains on the table: damaged hieroglyphs, later restoration, and the human urge to find familiar machines in unfamiliar lines. Yet none of that fully drains the image of its charge. In the end, the Abydos panel may be a lesson in humility. Ancient stone can be read in more than one way, and sometimes the oldest marks are the hardest to leave behind. What remains is the feeling that something is still unresolved. Whether the carving is a coincidence of erosion and repair, or a glimpse of a deeper memory, it continues to ask the same quiet question. Did the ancient craftsmen leave us only a damaged inscription, or did they preserve an image whose meaning reaches farther than we are ready to admit? Abydos still stands there, waiting for another reading.